Christopher Gallegos, and this is my first portfolio project for History 204. Today I wanted to talk about the American Armed Forces in World War One. So first, looking at when America joined World War One and started to send troops over. So in April of 1917, the U.S. declared war on Germany and finally sent troops over to aid the Europeans who have already been fighting since 1914. The U.S. tried to stay neutral in this war. As you can see with this political cartoon, it says peace on earth, goodwill toward men, but then on the back, war ammunition for sale, orders filled promptly. So the U.S. was profiting while maintaining a sense of neutrality, but in 1917, through the naval warfare of the Germans, the U.S. was kind of forced to join. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but this was the treaty between the Russians and the Germans. This was important because it meant that the Germans no longer had to worry about fighting the Russians, and they could more or less focus their troops on the Western Front. So African Americans in World War One, they played an important part. Many African Americans were eager to join the army and serve America. They had something to prove here, because at this time it was still extremely segregated and a lot of discrimination. So before the Selective Service Act, which made people sign up for the draft, they were even eager to join. The combat was segregated. There was 4 all-black regular army regiments and 2 divisions added later when it was needed because so many were signing up. African Americans mostly served in labor jobs, because they weren't used in primarily combat roles. Once America had kind of claimed a territory, the African Americans were sent over to hold it down and be there for support, but they were never on the fronts. Again, a lot of discrimination during this time period still. At some point, it was deemed a good idea to have African American officers, which could help make the African Americans feel more comfortable. But this was kind of a rough period because a lot of white men refused to pay respect to black officers, which were ahead of them in rank. They refused to salute them, and they were barred from like clubs and quarters and things like that. Just a quick look at the numbers. In the beginning, the nation had a standing army of 127,000 soldiers. This jumped to around 4 million, which shows how eager people were to join this war. 320,000 casualties, 53,000 of those being killed in action, unfortunately, and then another 63,000 non-combat related deaths. Mainly the influenza pandemic in 1918, So 30 more camps were built by the American Army to help contain so many more inductees, as you can see by this number here. Just a quick look at the two important weapons used in this period. The American Springfield. A quick look at that. This American weapon was the preferred one of the Army, but there was a problem with it. Not a lot were being produced because before the war, the Army was so low in numbers. There was only 2 factories who made them. So this preferred weapon had limited production, which forced the U.S. to use other weapons. But another important weapon was the Browning Model 1917, which was a heavy machine gun in this bottom right picture. What's important about this is it used water cooling instead of air cooling. Water cooling is exactly how it sounds. It uses water to cool the gun, which allows it to have a higher rate of fire. A drawback to this was it usually took around 4 men to operate this weapon. And the final part I wanted to touch on was 2 heroes in this war, which I thought had compelling stories. Alvin York, he initially was an objector of the war and refused to fight because of religious reasons, but eventually he was forced into fighting. Him and around 17 other Americans were captured by Germans and found themselves. Him and around 17 other Americans had captured Germans from their regiment, but found themselves under heavy fire from machine guns. So about 9 of the Americans were quickly wounded or died out of these 17, but York was actually able to kill around 20 Germans and then capture 132 enemy soldiers. He forced the remaining Germans to surrender, obviously. In his efforts, he was given the Medal of Honor and the Distinguished Service Cross. Another important figure I wanted to look at was Charles Whitsley. Him and around 600 men were entering German territory, and they were cut off from communications with the other forces. So him and 600 men had to defend against waves of German attacks for about 5 days. In the middle of this, he was given the opportunity to surrender, but fighting against the odds, he decided to continue fighting. There was 194 survivors. He was given the Medal of Honor for his extreme bravery and level-headedness. He was a lawyer before, so he kind of had that background. Unfortunately, this situation haunted him for the rest of his life, and he committed suicide by throwing himself off a ship as it was sailing in 1921. So that was a quick look at the American Armed Forces. Here are all my sources, and thank you for watching.